Hello everyone, just wanted to show you the results of a little experiment I've undertaken. You may recall, if you've watched some of my recent videos, that I am missing a model of the Russian cruiser Askold in 1/600th scale, which would complete my Russian fleet for the Battle of the Yellow Sea. And just recently, Broadside, who had the Kickstarters for Empires of Steel and the Three Crowns, or the Triple Crowns, just recently they've had a third Kickstarter called Hunting Grounds, which is for STL files to print off at home on your 3D printer of more 1500th scale models, and this time they're going to include a lot more Russian vessels, including the Askold. So my plan was to pledge to that Kickstarter, and that's now fulfilled, but the files themselves will probably be sent out in a week or two's time. And I'm waiting on a file for the Askold, which I was thinking I would print up in 1/600th scale. And I was wondering what it would look like, and then it occurred to me, well, I don't have to wait to see, how I get on with doing that. So I picked a ship from the files I already have, which is the Emden, famous light cruiser, which caused a little bit of havoc in the Indian and Pacific Oceans at the start of the war, and was eventually tracked down and sunk by HMAS Sydney in November of 1914. But anyway, it struck me as a good choice because the Askold was actually on convoy escort duties at the time of the Emden's fame, and so it was an appropriate ship. They could hypothetically have mid-matched against one another. So I thought I would print up the Emden, and I'm pretty pleased. It has its deficiencies. I'll go through some of those in a moment, but I'm pretty pleased with the way this has turned out. It's perfectly respectable. It would marry in with the 1/600th scale ships I have. Blowing it up though from 1/1500th scale, so it's 2.5 times the size that it's intended to be printed up at. And you do begin to notice some kind of disproportionalities, if you can call them that, and some lack of detail. So in terms of the disproportionality, I think you can probably make out the gun barrels are just weird looking, very sort of thick and squat. Don't really look like guns at all, but from a distance or from the side, they'll do. And in terms of lack of detail, there isn't really anything along the side like portholes, anything like that. So the actual hull is very flat and difficult to paint, because there's no sort of nothing that any wash would collect in, or dry brushing doesn't really work terribly well on it. The actual model itself only comes when it prints out with a front mast, and even that mast only goes up to there, and there is no rear mast at all. They say it was because they were proving too fragile, so they recommended just drilling a hole and putting some sort of brass wire in there. What I've actually done then is, for the front mast, I've kind of extended it upwards with brass wire, So the what I suppose you'd call them the yards and the upper two segments of the mast I've sort of scratch built, and at the rear I put a bit of wooden dowling which seemed to be the same kind of thickness as the front mast. Drilled a hole and put that in. Did the same thing with some brass wire to make the upper masts and the yards, and I even put like a little platform which I made out of a washer that fitted. That would have had searchlights on it in real life. So I've been able to make a little bit, from a distance, give it the appearance somewhat resembling what the Emden looked like in real life. And then, having got all these masts in place, it just seems to give it a little bit more kind of height and sort of depth as well, by just stringing some bits of cotton around some of the points where there would have been lines and so on to that the ship would have used to run flags up, and maybe as a sort of bit of way of supporting the masts. And front and back I've put a tiny little bit of wire in as well, and on the rear printed up a flag which I took from the Sea Creek 5 ship log files. All have the national flags in the top left hand corner, so I just grabbed an image of that, printed it off onto photo paper, shorter, sort of smaller size, and glued that on the back just to have a little bit of a flag flying. And as I say, I'm quite happy with it. The Askold will certainly fit in with the other Russian ships I've got, only they, being part metal as well, have a lot more onboard detail to them. In terms of this being a First World War vessel, though, rather than Russo-Japanese War, even at 1/600th scale, I'm still going to be able to play with this ship on the table size I've got, because its maximum range in real life was about 13,500 yards, but that's extreme range. In the Sea Creek 5 rules, the long range only goes up to 12,000 yards, so playing that at a scale of 1/6000th would mean that its maximum range on the table at 6 inches per 1,000 yards would be 6 feet. So I can easily accommodate that. So what I'm thinking about doing now is not only printing off a 1/600th scale model of the Askold, but also doing one for the HMAS Sydney. Now, and then having just a game, of the Emden versus the Sydney, the final confrontation between the two ships. Now, the HMAS Sydney was actually a Chatham class, town class light cruiser, and the broadside files don't include, and won't even in this third Kickstarter, don't include a Chatham town class light cruiser, but they do have the Weymouth class, and as far as I can see, the Weymouth and the Chatham were virtually identical in appearance, but just differed under the skin, as it were, in terms of armour thicknesses and where the armour was actually strengthened and so on. So they had different characteristics in terms of armour, but in terms of the visual aspect of them, they both looked identical as far as I can tell. So I'm just going to print up one of the Weymouth class models, blow it up to 2.5 times the size that they intended, and have that matched against the Emden here. So that's the end of that. Just have to wait now until the files are delivered from broadside in order to make up a model of the Askold. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Bye for now.